I've been on Infliximab, otherwise known as Remicade, for just over 2 years now. So I thought it time to give my sort of review of this drug and let you know what it's like. My name's Jacob and I've been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis for 10 years, and now for 2 of those years I have been on Infliximab, and it's been an interesting time. So I'm going to be covering what is it, going to be talking about why I was given it, what it helps with, what is it like to be on it, all the process of taking Infliximab, what it's like to live being on Infliximab, and talking about the future and will I be using it going into the future. So let's start. What is Infliximab / Remicade? Well, in its simplest form, it reduces your body's inflammation response. That's in the simplest form possible. So I was given it because I was in hospital with my ulcerative colitis. Hospital for UC. And I was in an uncontrolled flare and nothing was helping. I was on steroids, they weren't helping. I was on mesalazine, that wasn't helping. I was on intravenous steroids, that wasn't helping. So they decided to give me Infliximab, and at the time, the doctor or the consultant called it a rescue medication. And the idea was to rescue me from that flare that I was in. So I'm going to jot that down. It was used as a rescue medication. A rescue med. So what that entailed was I was in hospital. They gave me an emergency dose of Infliximab, and that was the rescue dose. And then from there, it's a sort of maintenance dose. Get a certain level of Infliximab in your bloodstream and keep it there. And in conjunction with Infliximab, I've also been giving azathioprine, which is an immunosuppressant. And the idea behind these two medications working in tandem with each other is that the azathioprine will actually stop me producing antibodies. Because sometimes with these sort of drugs, there's quite a few of them, they tend to end in MAB. They are called biological drugs, and the body can eventually produce antibodies to it. So it sort of fights it off because it's a foreign invader in your bloodstream, and your body's like, we don't want this in here. So quite rightly so, as the body should, it decides to eliminate it. But the thing is, we want that in our bloodstream because it's helping with our chronic condition. So the azathioprine tells the body, well, it stops the immune system from noticing, or hopefully from noticing, the Infliximab going through our veins. So that's why I'm on 2 medications, 2 immunosuppressants. So what's it like? So, like I mentioned just now, I had my first dose in hospital, and they call this a loading dose. So they don't pump you up to the maximum dose straight away. What they like to do is give you an initial dose, and then about a week or 2 later, you have another loading dose to get you up to that sufficient blood levels of Infliximab. And the idea behind it is to see if you have a reaction to the medication. If you do have a reaction, they can solve it there and then. If you have an allergic reaction, they can give you a countermeasure medication to stop that allergic reaction. But it's just to see how that you react to it. And miraculously for me, I reacted very, very quickly to the Infliximab. So quickly, in fact, that I noticed changes mere hours later. Some people report that they don't notice anything for weeks. But I was very lucky. I was a very large responder, fast responder to this amazing life-saving medication. I will say that. And it just started reversing that flare very, very quickly for me. And it was amazing because I was in a terrible state in hospital. And just this first loading dose, wow, it completely changed everything. So you have about a couple of loading doses, and then you go into your maintenance dose. Maintenance dose. And what does this look like? Well, to start with, it would be going to get an IV every 8 weeks. 8 week IV. So that for me entails going to a hospital in a different town because they don't do that here, which I find kind of confusing because they gave me my first dose at my local hospital, but I have to travel to a different town and I get my 8-week IV. And week before that, you have a blood test. Week before, blood test. And what this blood test is looking for is to check your liver function, check your inflammation levels, and just overall check that it's not harming your body and just keeping an eye on what's going on inside of you. So this is how it's been going for me. And let's say, for instance, symptoms were to return. Then the first thing that you can do is reduce the weeks. So it might go from 8 weeks down to 6 weeks. And then if that doesn't help, it can go down to 4 weeks. And then you might have increased the number of doses. So what you can do is increase the frequency before you change medication. So you can try and get the most that you can out of Infliximab before you decide to change to a different form of a biological medication. So there is room, if you ever find that you're on Infliximab and it starts to wane in effectiveness, bring up that you'd like to maybe reduce it down to a 6-week IV and see what happens. Maybe that will improve things. Then bring it down to a 4-week IV and then see what happens. Luckily, I am still on the 8-week IV. Touch wood. Where's some wood? There we go. I'm not superstitious, but I just feel like I need to touch the wood. So that's what I do to get my Infliximab inside of my body. It's kind of annoying having to go and get a needle in my arm. I've got like track marks now across my veins, like little scars from having so many IVs. And it's kind of a laborious process. The IV takes about an hour now. On these initial loading doses, it might be over 3 hours. And then once you're on your maintenance dose, for me, it's 1 hour. And that's because they know that you're quite unlikely to have a reaction. So they don't have to give it to you for so long. Because over those 3 hours, what they do is they keep checking up on you, checking your blood pressure, checking your temperature, making sure everything's okay. And they say if anything happens, to report it to them straight away. Some unusual things I find when I do get my IV, not so much these days, but definitely at the start, as soon as it started pumping in, I would start sweating. It suddenly, I get very hot. And you get a very uneasy feeling when you're getting something pumped into your veins, like there's something unnatural going on. It makes me feel a bit uneasy, and I don't really like that feeling. Just before they let's talk about the process of getting the IV in your arm very quickly. So they put something in here called a cannula. So a needle goes in, and then it's got these little dongle bits, and that can hook up to the machine like that, and then that pumps into the vein. And just before that, they use something called a flush, just to flush it through, keep it clean, make sure it's going through okay. And I used to describe this as sort of air conditioning into your veins, like this cold presence going into your veins. Sometimes it can sting a little bit because the cannula is quite long. And for those of you who don't have quite as prominent veins like I do, it can be a pain. I would not imagine it would be nice to get the cannula into your hand. Luckily, I always get it in pretty much this vein or this vein, usually this one. But I do have some track marks on this one, my scars of my battle, as it were. Yes, I'm very pleased for my prominent veins because it makes going to get blood tests and IVs a very simple process for me. So that's what the IV experience is like. What about side effects? Well, for me, luckily, I haven't really had many side effects, but the main one is prolonged illness. Because your immune system is suppressed, it can take longer to get over colds, and you have to be a little bit more careful. Now, the thing is, I've managed to avoid most colds over the past 2 years. I've only had 2 colds, and one of them was literally a week ago. So I have been quite vigilant in this step. I do not want to get a cold because complications can arise at an increased pace because you are suppressed. So an effect of this, and knowing this, is it has a mental effect. A mental strain, as it were. Because now you've been told you can get sick, and you can get more sick, and it's going to stick around for longer. It'll take your body longer, and it'll be harder to recover from something, and it could progress to something worse. Suddenly, you get told that, and you're like, everyone's a danger to me. Now I'm in a mindset where I'm trying to avoid people at all costs. And now I have to ask, if someone's got a cold, I'm not going to go and see them, or I'm going to keep my distance. And the part that makes this even more stressful for me is I work in an educational setting. So there's many people now mixing together, especially after the summer holidays. They come and mix together. And that's how I got my cold last week, because school was back in session and I got a bloody cold. And I was kind of frustrated about it because I did what I can to avoid being in people. But this mental strain, I really feel it when I'm in tight, compact spaces, especially if there's some sort of, whole staff meeting. I'm in a room filled with hundreds of people. All I'm doing is I'm looking around. I'm surrounded by people I don't want to be surrounded by, because all I'm thinking about is prolonged illness. I'm thinking about getting ill because of my IV, and I'm thinking about getting sick and dying. Yes, I take it to that extreme. So this is definitely something that will play on your mind if you start taking immunosuppressants. But it is worth it, because the benefits definitely outweigh the costs. I've been able to live a much more healthy life suppressing my immune system. My symptoms, for the most part, have gone. I really need to touch some wood. Don't want to jinx that. Definitely don't want to jinx that. There is something else they tell you. There's a huge list of side effects, by the way, an absolutely huge list. But the other main one that plays on my mind is an increased risk of skin cancer. Risk of skin cancer. Now, there are risks of other things like lymphoma as well. And that's another thing that I've been looking at. And it's terrifying. So the best thing to do is not dwell on those things. But this is one that you will end up dwelling on. Risk of skin cancer up. That's a terrible arrow, because it literally says, if you're on azathioprine in particular, to avoid sun exposure. Increased risk of skin cancer. Cover up. Wear sun cream. Oh my God. This plays on my mind a lot. Every time it's sunny, I put way too much sun cream on. I'm as pale as it comes. This really does play on my mind. Every time anyone says, oh, you've got an increased risk of this. Wow, that's the worst thing you could tell me, because I've got a bit of a predisposition towards anxiety as it is. And now knowing that I've got an increased risk of skin cancer, so I wear a lot of sun cream. But it is better to know this and to protect yourself against it, rather than not protect yourself against it and maybe get skin cancer. Now, the thing is, I don't completely avoid sun exposure, because sun exposure is very useful and healthy. So I just try and limit my sun exposure. I do use sun cream, but if I'm going out for a short time, I will let the sun hit my skin. One, it does feel nice. And two, you're getting some nice vitamin D, and it's just healthy in a plethora of other ways. So just keep this in mind. It is on the list of side effects, and that is something that I do worry about. Now, the lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes, it's not something that's happened to me. Luckily, touch wood. I'm going to be touching wood a lot this session. But it is something that when you read on that list, it gives you the shivers. And you think, why am I on this medication? This is horrible. So have a look at the list of side effects, but try not to dwell on them. But definitely something that plays on my mind and plays into this mental strain. Risk of skin cancer and other cancers. But the skin cancer is one that they mention in particular that you should cover up. Now, the actual risk is actually very marginal, very tiny, very unlikely to happen. But obviously, with such a large population taking medication, it will happen to some people. And I don't want to rule myself out. So what do I do about this? Well, the best thing that you can do is live life as healthy as possible. Healthy lifestyle. And that could mean a lot of things. But for me, it's the basics: diet, sleep, exercise, community, and overall well-being. Now that's a lot to cover, and if you'd like some help with that in terms of your IBD, check the link in the description for one-to-one support. I can help you out with that. But this is like something that I really like to focus on to try and just mitigate the risks of these things happening. But you can't avoid all risk in life. There is risk with these medications, and you have to weigh up the cost-benefit analysis, the cost-benefit of being on them, and the risk of not being on them, the risk of being on them. Now, the thing is, when I was in the hospital just before my loading dose, and I was being told about these medications from my consultant, I didn't really see the option of not going on them. And the reason why I had an option of medications, and I was told, he gave me the list, and I chose Infliximab. This was my choice to be on this medication. And I didn't spend much time researching it, I will be honest with you. I got given the list, there was 3 drugs for me to choose from. And the reason why I gravitated towards Infliximab, my friend had mentioned it to me years ago that he'd been on it. And I heard of other people being on it. So I chose the one that I heard about the most. There might be better options out there, but I just went with my gut instinct. And that's how I take a lot of my decisions in life. And it might have led me down, maybe it was the wrong decision to make. Maybe there is a better drug with less side effects, but this is the one that I'm on, and it's been 2 years. And I feel fantastic. So maybe it was a good choice. Who knows? I'll find out in about 10 years when something happens. But for now, I've been on Infliximab for 2 years. It's allowed me to get in great shape. I feel fantastic. I'm able to live my best life. And I just have to go to a hospital every 8 weeks and take a couple of pills every day. But I do highly rate Infliximab/Remicade. I think it's fantastic medication if it works for you. Now, I have looked on IBD discords. I've heard from people that Infliximab does fail. It doesn't work for everyone. So you just have to give it a go and see how your body responds. And at some point, I might produce antibodies. What will I do when that happens? Well, there's a plethora of other medications to choose from. And we'll go down that route when it comes to it. And they've got some weird names, these medications. The one that I've heard the most, I believe it's pronounced Adalimumab. Funny name. But I'll probably go with that one if this one fails, because again, it's the one I've heard a lot of people taking. So I like to go with it's almost like user reviews when you're looking at Amazon. I like to go with the one with the most positive reviews. Infliximab's been around for a long time. It's a bit of an older drug in terms of the biologics. I believe it was created in the 90s, potentially. So I was a wee little baby back then. So now I'm on Infliximab. When you do a bit of research into it, it says that it used to be a chemotherapy medication, but it failed in that and found great use in autoimmune conditions. So it is quite an intense drug. And that's why I like to really focus on this section down here, healthy lifestyle. That's something we can all be focusing on in all aspects of health. And it doesn't matter what's going on with you, there's always room to improve this, because it just helps everyone. There's so much obesity going on around the world. This is very important, and we need reminders like this for those of you who are struggling in that sense. And I do struggle with this too. It's not like you can just fix it and suddenly you're healthy for the rest of your life. No, it's sort of a constant modulating battle. You have to change things as things happen. You might get an injury, a stressful event might come about. Speaking of which, let's talk about how Infliximab has helped me in that sense, because I am very pleased to say that in moments when I would have otherwise flared, Infliximab has kept that flare at bay. And what do I mean by that? So there's been a number of stressful events. Stressful events. I won't go into detail what these stressful events were, but they caused me to feel terrible. They would have led to a flare in the past. Led to flares in the past. And I remember thinking during a number of these stressful events, I'm going to have a flare, aren't I? I'm going to wake up with blood in the toilet tomorrow. And lo and behold, I wake up the next day and I'm fine. And it's a shock. It's genuinely shocking to me. These stressful events would have led to flares in the past, but the Infliximab has kept it at bay. It stopped me from flaring. And that's why I think it's an amazing medication. Going back to that cost-benefit analysis. In fact, let's do a cost-benefit analysis. This might be helpful for those of you who are on the fence and you're not sure whether you should take this or not. Cost-benefit analysis. There you go. Right, so Infliximab. And over here will be drug-free. Oops, I wrote an S for some reason. We'll start with the benefits and we'll write them in green. What are the benefits of going on Infliximab? Well, it could potentially heal your flare. That's the main benefit in general, really. It could heal your flare with whatever autoimmune condition that you have. Drug-free. No side effects. Obviously, if you're not going to take the drug, you're not going to experience the side effects. But if it does heal your flare, better life. You're not flaring. You're going to have a better life. Better quality of life. Reduced chance. Now, this is going to sound counterintuitive. Reduced chance of cancer. Now, why would you say that? Well, if you're drug-free and you flare constantly, that's going to increase your risk of cancer. So overall, you've actually reduced your chance. Got an N there. Reduced chance of cancer. Drug-free. What are the other benefits of being drug-free? Hard to say. If you're going to keep flaring, well, you've got options to try other drugs, other medications. There are options there, but if you're going to be drug-free, you're probably not going to do that. Downsides. Cancer risk. There's an increased risk of cancer if you're drug-free and you keep flaring. Obviously, if you're not flaring and you're drug-free, that's a win-win. But you do have an increased risk of cancer, a greater risk of cancer than if you was on the Infliximab. So I'm getting distracted by my cat who's itching down here. I know you can't see her. She's just woken up and now she's itching. So you do have an increased risk of cancer over here, but it's minimal by comparison. Smaller. You do get side effects. And just because I got some minimal side effects doesn't mean that you won't get side effects. You might get side effects. Increased risk of cancer being drug-free. Worse quality of life. If you are flaring, obviously. If you're not flaring, then that's not the case. I would actually say stress. Because now you're worrying about things. You've got more to worry about when you're drug-free. And in fact, I'd like to actually put that as a benefit over here. And that's actually Is relax really the right word? Less mental burden. Mental burden. Down. Because now you're on a medication and it's keeping you healthy. The mental burden is reduced. Whereas the stress of being drug-free or being on a medication that's not working for you is going to stress you out. Just always, you don't know, it's an unknown factor. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. Unknown. Fear. You're scared. I would be scared. I was scared when I was on medications that didn't work for me. It's the unknown. That's stress. So this is quite a simple cost-benefit analysis, but I think you get the picture. If you are flaring with ulcerative colitis and you go drug-free, yes, there's no side effects. Yes, you've got options to try other medications, but you probably don't want to because you want to be drug-free. So you've got an increased risk of cancer from your uncontrolled flare. A worse quality of life from that flare. It's just going to give you stress. And it is going to be just terrifying because when's the flare going to end? Who knows? Maybe you're relying on herbal medicine. I've no idea if that's going to work or not. Yes, feel free to try it if you're one of those people that want to try it, but I would urge you to use a medication to get you out of your flare. Infliximab, far more greens over here. It's going to heal your flare if it works for you. Better life, because a better quality of life, you're not flaring, you're feeling healthier. Reduced chance of cancer in general from your flare, like if I'm flaring in my bowel, greater risk of bowel cancer, but to keep that at bay reduces that risk. And you do have an increased risk of cancer in different ways, but it's a small risk, and it is much smaller than the risk of getting cancer from being drug-free in an uncontrolled flare. Yes, you might experience side effects, and depending on these side effects, it might be time to not use that medication, but hopefully you don't get many side effects. Mental burden. So I said a lot more and the camera did not save it. So I'm doing this bit again. So I was talking about the cost-benefit analysis. And the thing is, when you are on a drug to control your flare, there is a compounding effect. So what do I mean by this? So you're on Infliximab. And you're drug-free in an uncontrolled flare. Drug-free. And I got to state this very clearly. You're in an uncontrolled flare. And there's a compounding effect. What do I mean by this? So when you're on Infliximab and you're controlling your flare, the compounding effect is that you're able to work on your health. And you're able to work on every aspect of your health, like your diet, your sleep, your exercise, your well-being. It all compounds and makes you more and more resilient, higher energy levels. You're going to be more productive. You're going to be more creative. You're going to be a more resilient, all-round person with much more energy, much more to give to society because you're able to work on your health and it compounds together to make you a more vibrant and healthy person. But when you're in an uncontrolled flare, the same thing is going to happen. There's a compounding effect, and your health is in decline. You might be eating foods that are nutrient dense, but your body is not absorbing them. So you become more and more tired as you become more and more malnourished. And then you might exercise less. In fact, you might become bedbound because you feel so tired and lethargic. You might sit at the computer all day. And then you start to atrophy because your body no longer even wants this muscle that you've built because you're not using it. And you might be not eating enough calories, so you start wasting away. And then you become more prone to accidents because you're weaker in general. You might fall over, you might hit your head. And then as you become more and more tired because you're more and more fatigued from lack of nutrients and not doing anything, you become less creative, less productive. You find it harder to get up in the morning. You find it harder to fall asleep at night. You become more and more tired and you're able to work less. You become less productive at work. You become less motivated to do anything. And then this compounds and it compounds because this compounding effect happens. You need to treat your inflammatory bowel disease and you need to do it soon. If you're in an uncontrolled flare and you're doing it drug-free and nothing is helping, get on a medication now. You can't keep doing this. You need to get out of this flare as fast as humanly possible. And then maybe you can consider being drug-free after that. But until you get out of this flare, this is just compounding. And it's compounding to be worse. You're compounding to have a worse and worse life. We don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about the positive compounding effect of controlling your flares with medication. Now, I know some of you might not agree with being on a medication. I hated being on a medication, but it does help me so much and it allows me to compound my health in the right direction. Would I be standing here going on about this if I wasn't controlling my flare? No, I'd probably be tired upstairs. I would not have any energy and I would have nowhere near any of this muscle. I'd feel like shit. I'd look like shit. And everything I would do would probably be a bit shit too. Because I just wouldn't have the energy to put myself into it. So, uncontrolled flares. Reconsider this. Reconsider this. I urge you. And it doesn't have to be this medication anyway. This is just the one that we're talking about today. So that's what I wanted to talk about, which I did, and the camera deleted it. So let's talk about the future. Where's this all going anyway? So my future with Infliximab is that at some point, I would like to try not being on Infliximab. I know I just went on a tirade, a tyrannical rant about why you should control your flares. Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. But what I want to try is when I'm not in a flare. No flare. Like right now, is to try an alternative. Try a lower dose. Perhaps an alternative med. With less side effects. And ultimately, I would love to be drug-free, but I need to control my flares. So the grand goal would be to be drug-free. But is that feasible? Is this feasible? Is any of this feasible? I don't know. Some people claim to have done it. Some people do claim to have done it. Who knows? And I'm sure those of you who believe in drug-free medications, if you watch this part, you'll have a lot to say. You might direct me to some herbal doctors. But the thing is, I'm not interested because I just don't really believe a lot of them. Especially when I've been in that state where I was in a deep flare, a hugely life-threatening flare. And the only thing that got me out, in mere hours it started affecting me, was Infliximab. When I've seen the power of this medication, the sheer life-changing power of this medication, it changed my life. It brought me out of that flare, it got me out of hospital. And it's kept me out of flare this whole time. Wow, what a wondrous thing modern medicine is. And there you go. The future. Can I get off of medications? That's something for me to explore. Maybe it will be a herbal route. But I just don't trust most of these people peddling herbal remedies online. I must say, they come across as very untrustworthy to me. Especially when you hear about people in uncontrolled flares and they're trying all these medications, and then someone tells them, oh, this herbal root will fix you. Will it? Yes, I mean, obviously there are positive benefits to these, like working on your diet, getting good sleep, exercising, taking supplements to fill nutritional gaps. I'm in complete agreement of these things. But will they heal you from a flare? Doubtful. I doubt it. But it will keep you in a healthy state, and it might benefit you a little bit when you're in a deep flare, but it's not going to heal the flare. It's not going to heal the flare. And I know, because I've tried, I've tried these things when I've been in flare. I believe that you need to get yourself out of that flare with medication. Obviously, work on your health alongside that. And when you're no longer in that flare, my God, work on your health and your diet and your exercise and do all those things to compound yourself into a healthy, positive person. But I just don't believe that it's going to heal you completely from a deep flare. Medication will get you out of that. I've experienced it myself. So anyway, I've been on a bit of a rant. And if you do want to leave a comment down below to rebuttal some of my things, I'd love that. It'd be interesting. But the main thing I'd like to hear from is people that have been on Infliximab for a really long time. That's something I'm very interested in. Have you been on it for 10 plus years? Because recently I went on a bit of a anxiety spiral where I wanted to find out, is Infliximab going to kill me long term? Is it going to whittle my organs into a withered state? So I sought out people who've been on Infliximab for a long extended period of time to find out. And I heard many positive things. But I'd like to hear some more from people over 10 years. Is there anyone that's been on Infliximab for over 10 years? If you're watching this, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next video.